Welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Burch, and this podcast, it exists for you. Whether you're a music lover, an educator, a choir member, each week we bring guests to the show to help explore what matters in music. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the show. Hello, welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Burch, and this is our last guest of 2020. Holy smokes. Don't worry, it's going to be such a great episode. Today, we talk with my friend, Melissa Trevino Keylock. She is full of positivity and joy and excitement and realness because 2020's been hard. And in no way is this episode degrading the toughness or the sadness that we've had to encounter. But as we're all looking towards 21, it's time that we refill our cups. We can't be great teachers until we have filled ourselves from within. And so today, Melissa is bringing us 10 really dynamite tips for how we can find positivity among the muck of 2020. And hopefully through this activity and this practice of finding the sparkling joy, you'll be able to dive into 21 and whatever it brings with a refreshed sense of awesomeness, because you, my friend, are awesome. And this episode is brought to you by our awesome friends over at the Kinnison Choral Company. Enough of that. Let's dive right in. There's so much to share. I present to you now, Sparking Joy, Finding the Positive Among COVID Choirs, with my friend, Melissa Trevino Keylock. Welcome, my dear, dear friend, Melissa Trevino Keylock. Hello.
Hi, Emmy.
I'm so excited to do this with you.
It is always a pleasure to spend any amount of time with you.
I feel like this is kind of one of those like rock royalty things where I've always seen you, like as I've grown up into the profession and came to conferences as a student, and you would always doing the coolest things. Like I remember going to one of your yoga classes and just thinking, whoa, this is so cool. Tell the listeners, who are you?
Hi, so I'm a choir teacher who's studied at the feet of some awesome masters and just love what I do. And so I'm excited to share some thoughts. This is a pretty challenging time for a lot of us in many ways. And the more I'm on social media and things, the more you see people discouraged and frustrated and challenged in ways we haven't been challenged before. And so you and I are very positive people who try to always look at the bright side of things. And so getting a chance to maybe look at some of the positives that come out of this tricky time is a great opportunity and a great reminder for me to look at those as well.
I love this idea. So when I first reached out to you and we were talking about what listeners needed to hear right now, this seems so natural because you and I are really upbeat people, but we aren't upbeat 100% of the time. And
absolutely right.
By no means are we saying that by looking at the positives, we aren't aware or recognizing or honoring the negatives that have come during this time. But absolutely. I think it's important that we have this conversation. But one more thing, we have to talk about your game show.
Yes, let's do it.
You're on a game show. What was the game show called?
So I was a contestant on 25 Words or Less, hosted by Meredith Vieira, who was obviously on the Today Show for 20 years or something like that. I had gotten an email over the summer in the peak of not knowing what was going to happen with my choir, with COVID, with everything. And it was just a pretty discouraging time. And I got this random email from a talk show saying, would you want to apply to be a contestant? And I thought, well, this is the strangest thing. Like nothing is going to come of this. But I checked it out to make sure it was a legit person. And not just some like prank or something, and proceeded to kind of do their interview process, which it was fascinating to learn. And, really, I did it mostly just to have something fun, to keep my mind off of the heaviness of, is my choir going to be able to open? Are we going to open in person? Are we going to be virtual? And so for me, it was really just something different to get my mind off of things. And at the end of the day, they got ready to do their cuts and send people home, and they were calling people to leave. And we thought we were going home. And they said, "You two get ready, you're filming in 10." And we were like, so then we went to our separate, it's COVID, so everything is different. We each had our own cubicle area for filming, and we proceeded to do the episode. And certainly having the time on stage and in that frazzled, the pre-performance jitters that you get used to after you're in our career profession, I think it really helped me on the show, because I was able to kind of kick into that gear of, oh, it's showtime. Go. Let's go.
Well, we recorded it on YouTube TV and caught some of it, but didn't watch the whole episode. And when I went back, it wasn't there. But as soon as it's on the YouTube, I am going to make sure the universe sees it, because my favorite thing was just how vibrant you were, so authentically vibrant, and it was fun. Just the little snippets that I saw.
Fun. It was a fun thing to learn something different, so out of my normal realm. And certainly I think being, the side of us that needs to be engaging and dynamic to keep our singers engaged is certainly a skill that is helpful on TV camera as well. So very easy. And I mean, how hard is it to be engaging when you're looking at the possibility of a grand prize of $10,000? So
no spoiler alerts here or anything, but
potential,
totally.
I said.
Potential. Well, that is so, and I love how you're showing the transfers between all of it, and you're seeking the positive. If we wouldn't have been in these times and the uncertainties, you would have never jumped into this crazy unknown of a game show.
Right.
So
I would have thought, oh, I'm too busy, or it's too much of a, just too much of a distraction from my normal, professional life. But because things were so up in the air, I thought, well, at least this is something I can just throw the wind and see what happens.
It's also the perfect segue into our conversation today, which I really love how you've kind of already titled it, this whole COVID choir without performances and celebrating the positives. And I think the first positive you've already given us, we have a beautiful list, but you've taken a trait that we all have through experiences of performing, and you used it on a game show. And so what an awesome opportunity to reflect and say, I might not have 5 million concert performances right now, and this episode is airing almost at the very end of the 2020 year. So what can we do to reflect and find those positives? And Melissa, you are the perfect person to guide us through this conversation. So...
And you are the perfect partner.
Yay, I'm so honored. Let's kick it off. Let's go through this list.
Sure. So as we were, kind of getting ready for our little brainstorming session to discuss ideas, obviously you and I are idea people, and there's probably a million things that we could talk about. But as I said, I was looking at social media, and so many people were struggling and just being discouraged. And so I just kind of thought maybe it would be great for us to talk about some positives. Again, not to deny the fact that there are people financially devastated. There are choirs, including mine, that don't know if we can open our doors again in the fall because of the financial impact of this. So please do not think for a moment that I am just like putting on my rose-colored glasses and ignoring everything else. There are very painful truths to this. Health-wise, for many people, they've lost loved ones. There are so many things that can be discouraging. But I think that that's really important. An important point that you brought up is that we're not saying those things don't exist, but from a music director perspective, what are some of the positives that we can look at? So in that vein, and with that as the kind of caveat to our discussion, I think there are many things that are benefits that can come from not having that concert date looming. Lead to an exploration of different things than we normally can in our pre-COVID world. And so I think that's kind of what we'd like to, kind of to today. So one of those things is having more time to kind of explore our repertoire. So including things like getting a chance to share more about the background on each piece, the connections to history, the connections to culture, perhaps insights on the composer, etc. So these are things that we try to throw in. Of course, we try to incorporate it. But when we have a deadline, as we know, of learning all the notes and rhythms and all the expressive features and getting the breaths in the right places and unifying the vowels and getting all the things the way that we want them to put it on stage and share it with this big audience, knowing that there's a recording probably happening. It's all of those things can take away the time that we need to look at some of these other aspects of the music. And so I know that you were talking about some different things that you've done with your choir to be able to explore different aspects from that perspective.
We brought in composers that could actually zoom into rehearsal. I know a lot of choirs have been doing that, actually having the living composers come in. What I love is that using this new Zoom format and the virtual rehearsing, and the lack of super pressure, we were able to have guests on the show that don't look like me, that have different lived experiences on the show, in rehearsal, have guests in rehearsal that don't look like me and don't have the same lived experiences, so that the singers were able to really connect in new ways. I feel, are closer than ever before because of the time to slow down, learning 3 or 4 pieces of music instead of 12.
I love that you talked about having the composer in with your kids, because, I've been teaching and conducting and composing for almost 25 years now. And I feel that at the beginning of my career, when I would go and do festival choirs or workshops or things and talk about being a composer, really composers were mostly dead white guys. And, the kids felt so excited to meet somebody. And, again, when I first started this, to see somebody in their 20s who was saying, this is something that I did and why, I think that that's an amazing thing for the kids. And to hear people like Jim Papoulis come on and talk, or come on your rehearsal and talk about the why behind the piece. What piece created? What is the background that led to this? I was invited by a choir to talk about Quiet Sea, one of my pieces that is my best-selling piece, actually. But in that process, we talked about what was my first piece, and we talked about Kookaburra. And so we talked about how that song came about because it was the last song that I got to sing with my mother. And when the kids then heard the opening and performed the piece, it doesn't matter that there's no audience. They now connect to something. The opening sounds like a hymn because it is. It's a tribute, a hymn to my mother. And then it switches into the background on these different pieces. And I know there's so many composers who are so generously giving their time to, because we know everybody's struggling. To give kids that different perspective is awesome. It's amazing. And
it changes everything. Like our concert was all virtual, all pre-recorded, all pre-mixed, everything. And every single feedback we've gotten, the number one song has been the one where the singers interacted with that composer multiple times, and that song became part of their system.
And seeing the person who wrote it, or learning about the person who wrote the lyrics or something like that, it certainly makes the music come alive. And you're right, having somebody who is different than yourself makes kids understand that there is a diversity in our world. And even if their conductor is a certain demographic, there are other people that are conducting that look different, that sound that have those different experiences. There are other composers who have written, again, with a diverse background. And so presenting that in front of the kids helps our kids that maybe are different demographics than us to feel like this is a career path that they could consider.
They also loved going into small groups for some of the things that, like old lyrics. We did a piece on Ella Fitzgerald, and we explored a piece on Amelia Earhart. We haven't performed it yet. But letting them go into breakout rooms and go do their own research and come back with their favorite quotes or their favorite facts. That has been such a fun, we would have never had time for that pre-COVID.
Absolutely.
And they've bonded, they're able to showcase their intellectual abilities in new ways. That's such a very much positive high point of all this, the time to go deeper.
Absolutely. The time to even focus on music education issues, time. My choirs are spending so much more time learning to do sight reading. Choirs, I really can stop and work on following a score and music literacy things that I didn't get a chance to do. I know you said that sight reading and even getting a chance to write music is something you've been able to do, because your choirs are 100% virtual right now, right?
We have been, and we will be virtual for a few more weeks after the holidays to see what the cases look like. But we do have a back in-person hybrid plan ready to roll out as soon as we see what the cases look like. We added a weekly music history, music theory class since the kids were all just kind of at home anyway, and it gave us an opportunity to hang out in a not choir setting, and it's open to all of our choirs, not just each individual choir, but anyone in our choir or friends of our choir can come to this music history, music theory time. And it was so much fun. I would prepare 3 or 4 fun topics in history and 3 or 4 things to do in theory, and whoever showed up for the class, quote unquote, got to pick. And so I'd send them into a room to talk about which one of the things they want to learn about. And they composed jingles, they composed hymns using chord progressions, they learned about chord progressions and inversions. These are just, and it was because that's what they wanted to do and we had the time. But that music education aspect, they also respect it. One of my singers wrote me the sweetest Christmas card and said, I haven't seen anyone but my family and the choir faces on the Zoom, and I know that that takes a lot of time for you to put together. So I wanted to say thank you for your time.
Oh.
Isn't that the sweetest little note?
Absolutely.
They know that we're working for them.
Bright side, the things that come up that maybe, maybe in the busy holiday schedule, maybe that kid wouldn't have taken the time to give that feedback.
So far we've looked at the benefit of going deeper into the piece, whether that's historical or theoretical or from the composer perspective or from a different person's perspective. We've talked about the increase in music education opportunities. What else?
So I think for me, one of the benefits that has come from singing with masks, because my choir is outdoors, socially distanced with masks, I do roam around the room and keep my distance, but I do in order to hear each kid a little better. It's amazing to me that my perspective has shifted from listening for the errors that I need to fix, really finding the joy, listening for the joy. How is the experience of singing in choir right now helping each kid get through this difficult time? So it's really shifted my perspective, because again, we are so trained to listen for what the error is, listen for what we need to fix, instead of listening for the joy of making music together. And so I think that's really important. And half the time with their masks, I can't hear all the consonants anyway. I can't hear the things. So it really helps me to kind of read the kids and see what brings them joy. I'm bringing different repertoire, certain pieces that they connected to before, because their lives were run, busy. Now so much is virtual. So choosing repertoire with themes of, the lyrics really sparking joy, and it again, looking for the joy that I can share with the kids to help them get through this time, rather than listening to the mistakes I need to fix before a concert deadline.
I love that you've highlighted that, because that was something I've never heard said out loud, but it's so true. You should try listening to what they sound like on a Zoom call. because you sure can't hear them. I mean, we do unmute and make a cacophony of mess. We have a point every rehearsal to unmute and make a hot mess of noise, and it's wonderful. But I still am just as positive reinforcement as ever, but now it's, oh, your eyeshadow looks fantastic and your eyes are so wide open. Awesome job. I see that you're smiling as you're singing. What a perfect oval I'm seeing. That looks like a great ooh. Like those type of feedbacks. Because all I can go is by what I see and how engaged they are. But yeah, finding the joy in that.
And when they're singing, for me, when they're singing behind the mask, they can't hear each other as well. And so when they are masked and singing, it forces them to be a leader. A lot of times, we know a lot of the kids just follow along the louder voices, the more confident voices, maybe the more experienced voices, but with the masks on, they can't necessarily hear each other as well. So it really creates, I think, the need for them to become more independent, more able to say, okay, I can't hear anybody else as well. I've got to step up and take some leadership role myself.
I think that's huge. And on the virtual flip side of that, it's like we're training a bunch of soloists. And one of my friends said, she spoke to my choir and sent them a little video. And she said, it's okay if your virtual recording totally flubs. This is Laura Delani speaking. And she said, it's okay if it totally flubs. When you're back together in the room, you will be supported by all of your friends and you are going to soar because you've put in the time solo.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, we've talked a lot about what we can share with the kids, but I think it's also important for us to look at the benefit we get from the changes that we've been forced into, including self-reflection. It enables us to ask our kids more questions. What did you hear in the music? What was challenging for you individually? What would you change to improve this sound? And delve into, how does the music make you feel?
Yes.
I know too, for me as a conductor, without all the concert prep details that I've had in the past, for example, the creating of the printed program, the stage setup, the dress rehearsal, detailed plans, the organizing guest instrumentalists and staging and all that, without all the stuff that we have to do to prepare a concert, I have more time to reflect on my actual time teaching the kids and how to meet the needs of the kids in our current COVID world, because the needs of our kids 1 year ago are totally so different than their needs now. And so they have this need to connect. And so I think it's important, this self-reflection for both the kids and for me, to take that time and think about what are the needs of the kids I have now, not the kids I had 1 year ago.
I think that's so good. And it's going to be different too. If you look at the kids we had in March, April, and the kids we have now, their needs are so different. And I think I'm seeing this in the virtual world 2 different ways. One, I put out the question to the singers, what do you want to sing in the spring? What do you want me to bring to the table? And they had the best suggestions. They want to sing in French and they want to sing in Italian because it feels good to sing those things by yourself. And it will sound cool when it comes together. And when they were sharing, they did this whole little clip on what their favorite part of choir was. So many of them said the harmonies when because they'll send me we played a game, they would send me MP3s. In the middle of rehearsal, I would send them to a breakout room. I would jump in and mix them and come back and play them. So it was very delayed feedback. So they'd sing, go do something for 10 minutes, and then I'd play for them. It was hilarious. But they love the sound of their voices together and the harmonies. So knowing what type of harmonies they like and what type of languages they like is because of them reflecting on, what do you like about this song? What do you not? What are you learning from this? And then the other side of it is totally not music related. Another really cool singer gift. One of the singers said, I kept telling them all COVID, it doesn't matter how hard you're working or if you feel like you're by yourself, keep dreaming, keep working on it, keep inspiring others. We'll get through this together. She made me a bullet journal. She took a journal and made a bullet journal and said that journaling is how she's gotten through this. Journaling and choir is all she looked forward to every week. And so made me how cool is that the singers are taking non-musical things away from this experience of us figuring out how to still be together.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I actually had one student who said to me that literally choir is the only time she's around other kids her age in person. And again, of course, we have the ability, we're in California, we're outdoors, with a different rehearsal schedule. But she said that school is virtual, her church is virtual, all the places her parents, they have a family plan that does not allow her to go visit her friends. The only time that she leaves the house is to come to choir. And of course, we have all the safety precautions put into place, but to know that that time is the only time in a week when she can be around other kids and interact live, that is such a responsibility. And
that responsibility is real.
Yeah,
that's why we're pushing. Like, I am doing everything in my power. I even have my plan ready to send to the mayor so the mayor knows what I'm doing, so he can be in support of my we want choir back in person.
Yeah,
because it's our responsibility to provide that. But you're also like you're hitting on so many good things. The deeper dive into the behind the music education side of things, the finding the joy in things that we might not have been able to find joy in before, the reflecting for both us and our singers. There's so much that is happening right now that's offering leadership in different ways for us to flex our leadership, but really for these students and these singers.
Absolutely. We had a fun warm up that I was trying to find ways in which it's not so teacher centered, and with their masks on and being spread apart, that they could take leadership, because I feel like that's something they really enjoy doing. And so we did this pentatonic scale warm up where each person 6 feet apart took turns leading by hand signs, and then the other person followed, but they all could do it with their partner. Of course, again, facing their partner, but farther enough away, and, with the mask, but they did the pentatonic scales with hand signs, and then they could do it. And it was aleatoric with the whole group, but because it's pentatonic, it still sounded good. And, right. But again, finding these little ways in which they can lead. And even then our kids that are maybe a little more hesitant or shy can lead, and find a way to stay social. And that same example can be done in a virtual setting as well. But just looking for those opportunities when the kids can work on those social development skills that are so important. And honestly, I'm concerned about what will happen socially to kids. Some of the kids, again, are not around other kids in person. And so it giving opportunities for leadership like that, I think, really makes a big difference to the kids.
We had a rule where every kid has to talk in rehearsal. Like, you have to unmute. So I literally would keep track, like old Montessori teaching days, of making sure every kid spoke. And I know which of my singers are just really incredibly better one-on-one. And so we actually had virtual recording days one-on-one where they could schedule to come in one-on-one with me in a Zoom room. And we would talk. They would record whatever they were recording that week. We would and that was the neatest thing. They would talk freely, but it didn't start that way. You had to build it to that point. And there were so many games that I either Googled or invented. The game feature of Zoom, holy smokes, I have like a novel of random games that we can play to team build, to have other student leaders, because it's so important. We're not together.
I think that's so right. They crave that time of connection, of human connection. And so, again, with the concert looming, we didn't have as much time for the icebreaker games, the social interactions, the times for leadership opportunities, and so these are some things that, again, looking at the bright side, trying to find things to celebrate, getting kids this time to really feel a connection when they have such a disconnect in their regular life is so helpful for the kids and for us to keep choir alive during this difficult time.
And I think there's a lot of these things that we would do before. Like you said, we'd have little icebreakers and little warm-ups. But now there's so many, because we are always asking for them to speak. Which one of these 3 warm-ups do you want to do? Which one of these 2 icebreakers do you want to do? Giving them the choices. I can see how once we are back together, some of those choice aspects and some of the play aspects will still be present because we've learned them and we've learned the routine. It won't take up as much time when the concerts do come back into being.
Absolutely. And, on that note, I think it's also important that we're talking about all these ideas and ways that we can take care of our kids. But I think it's also important to look at a little bit of a shift in mindset here, but how we as conductors can take care of ourselves during this time. Because as we know, if we burn out, then we don't have anything left to give to the kids. And the burnout factor is real. We're all learning technology we're not necessarily comfortable with. We're all learning new ways to creatively address the needs of choirs during COVID. And so you and I have had conversations in the past about how important it is for us as choir directors to do that self-care. We always talk about how important it is, and yet the culture pre-COVID for choral directors in the United States is to out busy each other.
Yes.
You are only a good teacher. You're only a good conductor if you're busy, busy, busy. How are you? Oh, I'm busy. I'm so busy. I'm doing this all state. I'm doing da. It's almost like a competition in busyness. And I had already had a personal kind of recognition that this constant need to be busy, the constant need to, it was not a self-serving, I need to make my resume look bigger. It wasn't about that, but I felt like in order to serve the kids, I had to be doing all the opportunities that came up, and I had to really fill my days and fill my nights with busy. And so I think COVID has forced all of us to slow down. And that's not to say we're not all looking for new opportunities and new professional development stuff. We can get to that in a minute. But if we're not a happy person, we're not going to be a happy teacher. We're not going to bring the human side of teaching young people. We have to take the time to take care of our relationships outside of our work relationships, not just with our work colleagues and with our students and our staff, but our relationships at home with our partner, with our family. COVID has actually brought some of my family closer than I've ever been before. We have family all across the country, and we get together now for a weekly Zoom meeting. And we barely, we'd make a phone call every now and then, but life gets busy and you lose touch. And, I think that's one of my favorite things that has come out of this time, is that we literally get together every Saturday night with Leon, my husband's family, and, whoever's free gets on, and we get on every single week because we love being able to just catch up on people's news and stay connected. So yeah, the keeping those relationships is something that I feel like when we're in that busy time, which is for most of us, everything pre-COVID was always about, filling our days and filling our nights and taking this time to take care of our physical health. And so COVID, I think this is something else that we can take care of our health. So again, we have that energy to give to our choirs and to our families that they deserve, that maybe we have neglected pre-COVID.
I think there's a whole habit thing you're kind of hinting or alluding to here, because you had mentioned this before COVID. You had just made the move, and something you said really stuck with me. I think I told you this before we were recording, but you said something like, make sure you are balancing work and life. And when COVID hit, we're like, okay, how can we make the best habits and structure and routine for our family so that our careers can thrive, but our relationship, our health, our new creative endeavors can also thrive?
Absolutely. When we give all of our energy and all of our effort to our career and to our kids, our adopted kids of our choir, I fear for people who give all to the professional life And then they wake up one day and they haven't, when you don't give energy to someone or something, it dwindles and it withers and it dies. Whether you're talking about relationships or your health or
Or
anything.
plants. I've started keeping plants alive.
Have you?
I have not killed all the plants. I have a Christmas cactus with little pretty flowers. Well, one flower fell off, but that wasn't my fault. No one told me that you're not supposed to feed the plant when it's flowering. But I've learned now. And I have a cute little like holly thing with red balls on it, and I have a whole bunch of cactus like succulent things. Anyway, sorry, plants. If you
No, that's
neglect them, they
perfect.
die.
It's a great analogy. Anything in our lives, if we don't give it the attention it needs, it will fade, it will die. And so I think it's really important. I think COVID has probably been a big wake up call for some people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, listen, I don't have my choir right now. I mean, so many people, it's devastating. There are people who have temporarily or permanently closed their choirs, or they've put on hold, like we'll reopen when, you know, when things get better. But I think it's you, again, you have to put that energy and you have to feed your relationships, your health, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise you will find out that there's nothing there. You
Right.
know, and I think that this has been a big wake up call for that, to make sure that we're taking that time to connect with family, you know, to connect with our health, to take care of our health, whether that means meditating or hiking or whatever it is. You know, I think that that's just such a beautiful message that we can take, a beautiful reminder that it's something that we have to give energy to.
I love that it's also not directly related to the music, that when we work on ourselves, the music and whatever ensemble we're in front of, whether it's the choir you've always been in or a new choir you're going to form post COVID, it becomes better because you've invested in the thing that's making it happen. Just like we've invested in the music by learning more history and by doing more music education moments. And we've invested in our singers with all of the reflection and the leadership opportunities. And it's just so interesting to see how all of it is so intertwined. And if you pause, it really is a bunch of positives.
Absolutely. And it's super exciting too, because having some of this time that we didn't have before. We keep talking about time over and over again.
Yes.
We now have the time that we can also do maybe some even growth in ourselves as musicians too. We, you know, there's so many online opportunities to expand our knowledge and education. And, you know, every other breath I see another ad for a different workshop or a different thing that pre-COVID was probably available just to the people in that area for a live event. You know, all these ACDA state chapters are having open enrollment and virtual events that we can attend. I mean, literally almost every day of the week, there's a state
Right.
conference that
There's
we could
but I think
attend.
it's important as we're drawing attention to like what we can do, whether that's focusing on your health or focusing on enhancing your musical skills, going to more things, that the level of overwhelm and what you can handle, knowing yourself, going back to that reflection is so important. If you don't thrive in those type of environments, there is zero guilt in not doing them. Like if you stop at the end of COVID and look back and are like, all I got out of COVID was that I'm not sleep deprived anymore, great job.
Yes.
You don't have to have a laundry list of the COVID to-do list that you accomplished. That's not what this is about. I think that's an important thing because I've heard a lot of teachers just, well, I have nothing to show for my time during COVID. You don't have to have a product.
No.
I think that's a big thing too. But how cool is it that if you want to, like, hey, I can play almost like a dozen Chopin waltzes on the piano. That's what I've just recently started learning some nocturnes because I think my granny is getting tired of FaceTiming me and hearing Chopin waltzes. I FaceTime my granny every day. That's a COVID positive. She was just a phone call every day, and then COVID happened, and I'm like, yeah, you're gonna start FaceTiming me. She hated it, but now she loves it.
Oh, see, these are the things. The humanity, the need for human connection is so real, and you know, it's sad that it takes a pandemic to teach us some things like that. But I think that that's important. That you know, we learn to nurture those relationships and look at the bright side and positives of things. And you know, and again, like you said, when you have this time, you can take opportunities or not take the opportunities. You can go to these Zoom meetings. You can, sit at home and compare 5 different YouTube versions of a you're doing, because you actually have the ability now to take the time and form your own. Like, I never had time to sit and, YouTube all the songs in my repertoire, but this time I did get a chance, and I put in the title of the different pieces, and I watched, 5, 6 different interpretations, and took some things and went, what were they thinking? But other things, this time is given to us to do those kinds of things, and interact with colleagues, maybe do a podcast that you'd never done before, like for me.
I've always wanted to have a podcast, but seriously, I thought it was going to be a running podcast, because nerd alert, I can tell you all about all the like long distance runners and their times and how they train and who their coach is. Like, that's my secret hobby. So I thought I was going to have like a running podcast, and then COVID happened, and I missed my people. Like, I missed you. Yeah. I missed my choir people.
My tribe.
I know. And I realized that never would I ever have enough time to give my music ed students at the university level, would I ever have enough time to introduce them to all of my friends and to make sure they heard all of these really awesome people sharing what they're really good at, the one thing they do that really matters. So that I would have never had time to reflect and figure out how to do this. Now, I do want to say one more thing about the time thing, because I'm just coming down from becoming a wannabe Disney animator and making a virtual concert on Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro. So there was a solid 2.5 week period that I'm pretty sure I was a zombie because of the time needed to make that. I fell down the stairs something like 4 times because my spatial reasoning was so whack from being behind the computer making a movie.
Wow.
Totally worth it. But there was a couple week period that I don't remember much of anything. And I don't think I did any self-care. I might have put like eye masks underneath my eyes one day because I thought I looked puffy. But there was zero self-care. I totally, like when we had our designated coffee time, my husband and I was like half asleep, I think. I don't really remember. It was so bad. So there are times when there isn't really time.
Right.
I'm going to use the skills that I've learned with Logic and iMovie and Final Cut Pro and GarageBand forever.
Right.
Like, there is something so much fun about my guys group getting together and all getting an iMovie and creating their own warm-up beat so that we can do like pass the consonant around the Zoom room. Like, there is something so cool. I would have never known how to do that.
Absolutely. Right. Finding those opportunities as you feel inspired to do so, to challenge in new ways, learn different things, offer a topic of something. I applied to do, since California is doing their state conference virtual, I thought, oh, well, maybe now's the time, because I wasn't going to go all the way up to Northern California. So I'm going to do a yoga thing for them, and like find different ways to explore things that you didn't get to do before.
Yoga online, that's been, one of my girlfriends did her yoga teacher training as part of her, she got her stimulus check and just was like, I'm going to just use this for yoga teacher training and see what I can learn. I attended all of her classes in Zoom. I am a terrible yogi on Zoom. Like, I'm not good. I get super distracted.
I did a lot of workshops, especially when the shutdown first happened and people were suddenly thrown into this online teaching. And so I did a lot of yoga Zoom sessions for choirs across the country. And it was beautiful to meet the kids and to see their smiles and show them something that they can add to their, toolkit of music. Just to have things available to them to explore a different side of their musical life. And I think that was a really beautiful thing for me to stay connected with other kids, because we're not doing clinicking gigs. We're not doing, traveling around and meeting other kids. And that was one of my favorite things, was to travel and meet large groups of kids who all have that in common and love music enough that they're giving up their weekend to come and sing together. Like, to me, the energy of that is amazing. And so getting
this
to
is
do
why
that.
We're extroverted people. So those introverts listening right now are like, what in the world? Which I also don't understand them, but what you're saying is all really good stuff. The awareness of what you need, and you did those awesome. They looked so cool. All the pictures of the Zoom rehearsals with you yogaing with a bunch of choir kids. That was so cool.
Well, I'm actually borderline introvert extrovert, but you would not really ever know that.
I wouldn't have known that.
I time quiet with just my husband and my dogs at home, like in order to recharge. I can't do, like I can do a 3-day all-state festival, but then I need to crash at home and kind of have my time to myself. So yeah, it just, COVID has given me a ton of that introvert time. So that's why
you're able to give.
Yes.
See, you'll know if I haven't talked to anybody because my energy level is like in the bottom of the depths of hell. And I'm like, and I need this.
I have recharged in a lot of ways. So, just physically and emotionally. And so I know that the timing is not right in our country yet for us to get back to whatever our new normal is that we choose to create. Mm-hmm. Again, going back to normal isn't maybe the best thing. And that's kind of a tie up to what we're talking about. This time teaches us some things, so maybe we can learn from them and take those positives and then incorporate those when we do go back to, again, the new normal that we create.
I love that, and I sincerely hope that this episode gives the listeners time to just stop and think. Maybe you stop and think, how can you better fill and feed your cup? How can you look at the music differently? How can you pick new music? I learned how to do barbershop. If you would have asked me 12 months ago, 11 months ago, if I would ever do a barbershop song, now I'm pretty much obsessed. And I have like a posse of followers in my choirs that love barbershop. And we're looking at whole new experiences because of it. But I think it's important for the listeners to go through these things and think, what is something you can go deeper into the music this spring? What is a way that you can enhance either how you're teaching or what you're teaching? What is something that you can find joy in that you've never really thought about before? How can you incorporate self-reflection into yourself and into your students' lives, along with student leadership and community building and those things? I really love this last point that you brought up. Will you talk a little bit about this idea of identifying elements that make choir lucrative to new people? So recruitment. Let's talk about recruitment.
So obviously in the COVID age, it's different. Recruiting is just a different thing. Before we had a choir festival and we'd invite kids from the local community and bring a friend, and we would do a Saturday one-day event, and they would come and they would do a concert at the end for the parents, and the parents would go, wow, you did all that in one day. Imagine what you could do in a year with this choir, and that was our big recruiting event. Now I do what's called Peach Jar, which is the virtual backpack for kids now. Instead of putting notes in back in the day, it was like a folder that teachers put notes in for the parents. Now it's Peach Jar or other companies. Peach Jar is one of the big ones, and it's a note. It's basically a newsletter with news from the principal and the teachers, but you can buy ads if you're a nonprofit or even I guess for profit, that might benefit the kids in that school. And so the principals each individually review each person who applies. So we have advertised in Peach Jar, and so it's changed our program. But for us, we've had some kids join who simply can't do their normal activities because it's shut down completely from COVID. So we've had some parents who'd say, well, you're one of the things that my kid can do. And so we need other things than just sitting in front of a screen all day. And so this is something active, participatory. So again, trying to see the good, looking that we can now reach a different, to coin a business term, a different market than in previous years. So for us, being able to reach kids that maybe they're just not doing their other activities, and parents need something to keep their kid entertained. And maybe some of those kids will discover a love of music and a love of singing that they never would have found otherwise.
We went on the news pretty early on just because one of our mission pieces is serving the community. And realizing how much I needed to be with people and acknowledging that connective tissue and that connective piece we created a sign up on our website where, if it doesn't matter, at the time we only had a female voice ensemble or a treble voice ensemble. And we said, hey, Savannah, if you need more, let us know. And we had people fill out, hey, I'm an adult. I really want to sing with people. My church isn't having rehearsal. Hey, I have a third grader. They really like to sing, but they've never done choir. Is that a thing? So based on, I had parents calling. Oh, that was a blast. But based on all of that, we created these small ensembles because we had the infrastructure from exploring different ways to do choir safely in March, April, May, that we went from 1 choir to 4 in a matter of a month. And it's so much fun. Like, it's so much fun. But it's all about that community and just putting it out there. Like, yeah, were there bumps along the road as I learned how to perfectly set up my space for a virtual rehearsal? Yeah. And I still have some bumps. Like, sometimes the mouse gets lost. Like, that's a thing. And the kids all tell me that it happens all the time, but I feel like an idiot because the mouse gets lost. But I find it, and we get back to normal. One of my girlfriends always has a hard time with switching audio, and so the joke is, whenever something's loading, the first person to unmute and tell a funny joke, like, gets a bonus point or whatever. So it happened. We were having a collaborative rehearsal, and something froze on the director's screen, and some senior unmuted and told this hilarious joke. Like, when sometimes I lean forward and tuck my knees, and that's just how I roll.
Oh boy. And you told that joke.
I can't. I didn't tell it. Some kid told it. I'm like, that's awesome, and they just had him ready to go.
Well, you know what? That's actually, that brings up a really a point I hadn't even considered in thinking about things for today, that our students are seeing a real side of us. It's not this polished, we've got everything together, we look like we got our act together, we've planned every detail of the rehearsal. We are freaking winging it sometimes. We are learning new things. That's good for kids to see.
Yes.
Or, as you said, you felt like you're making an idiot of yourself. We did have some rehearsals where we were online as well. And there were so many times I felt like I didn't have the polished Mrs. Keylock teacher face on that I wanted to have. My dog came in and licked my face once. I have drool hanging on me. I thought, you know what? This is actually good. Mm-hmm. That's actually a really beautiful addition to the thoughts today, is that our kids are seeing us as real people, not as music experts necessarily, but just real people who like them and music and want to bring that sense of community, bring all those things that they like together in one place.
It's so refreshing when they connect with you, whether it's, we have all sorts of different connective mediums now because they asked for it. So we have GroupMe and Remind and weekly newsletters and email and text messaging that goes to our work number, but then comes to my cell phone, which has been great. The kids love to be able just to quickly text and ask a question or just say, hey, I'm struggling with this. Any ideas? That's been my favorite question. I think it's so interesting to see how close we've become because we've all endured this together. And minus the first couple weeks where people were trying to scope out, we give everyone the first month for free in our choir land, so they can see if it's for them. Minus the 1 or 2 kids that just said they don't want any more things in front of the computer.
Right.
We've grown during COVID. And I just think it's because of these things you've said. We've kept our finger on the pulse of the community and the singers, and we're not afraid to say music's going to be the catalyst that brings us together, but it's kind of the back burner right now as we use it to get together and to move forward.
Artistic excellence is not the current number one goal, be all end all. It's striving to use music as that vehicle to bring that sense of community, the sense of joy, and then we'll get back to artistic excellence when we can.
Hey, my little wannabe Disney animated film was not awful. It was definitely not amazing, but it was not awful. And those parents...
Pixar's not hiring you anytime soon.
No, Disney's not going to call. They might be like, hey, animator, that's cute that you learned how to do that. How old are you? 8? Oh, you're not. So I think it's just interesting to see how the kids want to be good. And I've found that some of them listen to their recordings. Like one of my soloists said, hey, I need, she actually had an actual solo, not just sing solo. I want to record that another time. I didn't like my ah vowel at the end of this one phrase. Yes.
Self-reflection, just like we
Yes.
Yeah.
It's so good. Oh, Melissa, this has been a great conversation and a perfect way to kind of wrap up 2020. Thank you so much for preparing such fantastic sparkles.
I love that. One of my favorite little expressions is spark joy. And I think that is just just a beautiful reminder to us. 2020 has its challenges, to be sure. But for those of us who have the ability to, take this time to look at the good and look about how we want to make our lives, our personal lives, our professional lives, and just stay connected to the kids and give them something that's going to be meaningful through this time until we can reunite in a maskless way.
Maybe, who knows? Well, this has been lovely. You've shared so many things, but I always give the guest an opportunity for like the one thing that matters that you definitely want the listener to walk away from. Is there anything you want to say to make sure it just cements into their heart and souls?
I think we wrapped it up well in that last expression, spark joy. As a choir teacher, you have the ability to bring joy to people who right now really need it. And so I think that most important thing is the human connection, the joy that you can bring by choosing to focus and learn and celebrate the positives that have come from this and share those with your community. And just we'll all put our positive thoughts into 2021 being a year that we can celebrate the growth that came from 2020.
So beautifully said. Thank you for doing this. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for sparkling right along with me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we enjoyed recording it. I want to give you a little tiny homework assignment. Take a second and reflect on what sparks your joy. What are your positives? Seek them out. Find them. Jot them down. Put them in a note on your phone. Have them to reflect upon as you do whatever it is you're going to do in 2021. I can't wait to see what you do. And I'm here if you need anything at all. We've made it to the end. No, we don't know what's ahead, but we can do this. Look at all the positives that we were able to find in today's episode. Please, my friends, know that what you're doing matters. Of course, we know that music matters. And you're going to go spark some joy before I see you next time on the Music Ed Matters podcast.